Hello folks, welcome back once again to Untitled Chapter. This is Chris, and today's topic on this video is the macadamia nut industry in South Africa. I thought it was time to take a look at something South Africa plays a role in that's not focused on the lockdown, not focused on ANC's governance and things like that. So what about macadamias? Let's talk about macadamias and what's happening in South Africa. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the macadamia nut, which comes from Australia, was first planted commercially in Hawaii. And the United States, for the longest time, was the world's leading producer of macadamia nuts. In fact, they retained that role, commercial macadamia nut production, all the way up until the year 1997, when Australia finally surpassed the United States as the world's largest producer of macadamia nuts. So who's the largest producer today? Well, you might be surprised to find that in fact, South Africa is the world's largest producer and exporter of macadamia nuts. Isn't that something? Sadly, South Africa leads Africa when it comes to confirmed cases of COVID-19, having half the continent's cases. It also leads the world in HIV positive cases and many other sad statistics. But when it comes to macadamia nuts, on a bright note, South Africa leads the world in production. South Africa has nearly 20,000 hectares with 19,500 hectares of macadamia trees planted in orchards across South Africa. Now, these are concentrated in three primary provinces: Mpumalanga with nearly half production at 49% of the orchards, Limpopo with 21%, and KwaZulu-Natal with 20%. The remainder are spread across the Eastern and Western Cape provinces, where there are few orchards as the climate is not ideal for macadamia nut production. Now, the thing about macadamia nuts, ladies and gentlemen, just to learn a little bit about the industry, is it takes up to 18 months for a sapling to be ready to be planted. Of course, they can graft saplings together too to more mature root systems to make them grow faster. But about 18 months before a sapling is ready for planting, and you can expect your first crop in 4 to 5 years after that planting. Now, in South Africa, it will cost you about 100,000 rand per hectare to establish a macadamia orchard. So a 10-hectare orchard is going to cost you 1 million rand in startup cost. But when you think about the return, it's worthwhile because a macadamia nut orchard can get you up to 375,000 rand per season, per hectare. So that in a single season, after they reach maturity, after 5 years that they produce nuts, you could make as much as 4 times your initial investment for the outlay to plant the orchard. Now, think about the macadamia nut crop in South Africa. One of the reasons why it leads the world in exports is because 98% of the crop is exported. Key markets include China, Europe, Canada, and the United States, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the Chinese market's a little bit different, as the Chinese market, the preference is for nut in shell. So there's less processing involved to ship them to China. But there are disadvantages. The Chinese, until just a couple years ago, imposed a 19% tariff on South African macadamia nut exports to China. 19%, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, the same China that claims to be a fantastic economic opportunity for the world sought to prevent these macadamia nuts from coming to the country. The tariffs were lowered recently to 12%, but 12% is still an outrageous tariff on a agricultural commodity. Yet China does that, 12% on South Africa's macadamia nuts. Yeah. So China nut and shell. So it's a trade-off. It costs less to process them, but you've got a high tariff. Europe, Canada, and the U.S., the Western markets prefer the kernel processed versions, either whole nuts or chips of nuts. And so there's a whole process involved in that for shipping them. Now, the macadamia nut market in South Africa is not without its challenges. Chief among those is that domestic consumption is rather low. With just 2% of the crop consumed domestically, South Africa remains vulnerable to export and markets and commodity price swings, ebbs and flows. Now, this is one of the most profitable nuts out there, tree nuts. Nonetheless, it is subject to price swings. And that's a challenge. When 98% of your crop is exported, you have very little, virtually no domestic consumption. That presents a challenge for producers. And that's something that South African producers need to take a look at, and they're concerned about to up the percentage. By comparison, Australia, where the nut originates from, 30% of Australian macadamia nut consumption is domestic. 30%. So it's a very, very big difference than the South African marketplace. In addition to that, there's a high percentage of nuts that are stolen. There's a lot of theft that takes place of macadamia nut orchards, and also the sale of low-quality nuts in the domestic market, which undermines the quality and the prestige of brands of macadamia nuts. And that's a challenge. Additionally, this year in 2020, in the midst of Wuhan coronavirus COVID-19, the macadamia market in South Africa is suffering from some unexpected drought in some locations, as well as a very much unexpected disease outbreak this year, which is interesting because some of the nice things about growing macadamia nuts is that the labor requirements are low. A lot of it's mechanized. Pests are normally low and quite limited, and it's easily manageable to manage one of these orchards. So that is something interesting about it. The global industry is somewhere in the order of over $900 million per year for macadamia nuts, quite lucrative. With South Africa being the largest export market, that's a nice feather in South Africa's cap. Now, I should mention that the industry has an association that represents it. It's the Southern African Macadamia Growers Association, or SAMAC. And they report that South Africa tripled their plantings of trees, and there were a massive number of trees planted in the recent past, with over 7.5 million trees planted in 2016. And 2,000 hectares are added to macadamia production every single year on average. So that's quite a growth in the industry in South Africa. But in South Africa, despite this growth, macadamias make up just 1.42% of the tree nut basket of nuts available or that are produced. So it's a rather small percentage. And as I mentioned, domestic market is something that could see a lot of growth. So there's two opportunities there. Now, this was expected to be a bumper year 2020 for macadamia nuts in South Africa. But a couple little road bumps happened along the way. As I mentioned already, a drought unexpected in some locations, as well as the issue of unexpected disease breaking out in some orchards has limited production. Initially, South Africa's production was set to be 66,000 tons of macadamia nuts this year, which is amazing. That makes it, of course, the world's largest producer. But that figure was revised downward recently, and it went down to, and I'll quote the South African Macadamia Growers Association president or CEO Liesl Pretorius. Liesl Pretorius said that a revised crop forecast was carried out back in March, and this is a quote from Ms. Pretorius. She said the figures had dropped to 62,000 tons, down from 66. And now, after the second quarterly crop forecast, it is at 49,503 tons nut in shell, measured at 1.5% kernel moisture content. I'm sure you want to know what that was. This is about 16% lower than the 59,000 tons harvested in 2019. So 2019, the crop was 59,050 tons, and it was projected to be 66,000 tons based on new trees in orchards coming of age this year. However, as we see, the drought and the issues when it comes to disease have limited production, and it's even lower than we expected. Nonetheless, that should keep South Africa pretty high on the list of macadamia nut producers, if not the top around the world. Now, interestingly enough, just recently in the past few weeks, there have been online auctions for linking wholesalers and buyers with producers in South Africa, and the first went off very well. 60 tons of kernel and 10 tons of nut in shell recently were put on auction by Hello Choice, which successfully forged an online gateway for the macadamia industry. Sellers and buyers can quickly access each other through an efficient bidding process. Yep, there you go. So that's recent. They just had another auction on the 18th of August, I believe, the second one. And so that's good interest for the macadamia industry in South Africa. So folks, I thought it'd be nice to bring you something to talk about some positive developments in South Africa. Not that the crop is lower this year, but that South Africa leads the world in something other than HIV infections and leading Africa in COVID-19 confirmed cases. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. South Africa leads the world in macadamia nut production. It's a potentially lucrative marketplace for those who can get into it. But of course, the industry does suffer from some challenges, such as high levels of theft and the sale of poor quality nuts in local markets, thereby undermining the domestic consumption. And domestic consumption being quite low at just 2% of production, that's something that the growers will have to take a look at in South Africa. Well, folks, if you found this video interesting or informative in any way and you're not subscribed to Chris White Africa, I ask you to take a moment and smash that subscription button right down there. And be sure to toggle the bell icon, because the bell icon will get you updated notifications whenever I do a prepared video like this, or a special feature live stream, or just a stray voltage live stream on my YouTube channel. Feel free to leave comments and questions. I do my best to review all of those. And finally, I ask that you smash the like button, because likes drive viewership, ladies and gentlemen. Likes make a big difference in whether people watch the video or not, and how many impressions show up for others. And I think it's a positive video talking about a good subject for South Africa, and one that South Africa, I think, can be proud that it leads the world. Macadamia nut production. Well, folks, thank you so much for your time, for your patience, for your patronage. God bless, and have a good day.